all collected as a group, and we were kind of like, well, looks like this night has just dried up. And I got, I don't know how, just the idea to play a song. And the song that I played was Nearer My God to Thee. And Nearer My God to Thee is reputed to be the last song that was played. There's a couple of, I guess there's a that's not discrepancy, there's a debate a little bit, right?
Could I elaborate just a
Sure, I would love
bit?
for you to.
Almost everybody has heard that story, how the band played on until the bitter end. We've all heard that, and that's a very true story. Even as the water crept up past their ankles, they still played the music. Now, the water was 28 degrees. The temperature outside was 32 degrees. The band played on. The band leader, Wallace Hartley, turned to the other men and said, "Go ahead, leave. Get out while you can. There's nothing more you can do. Try and save yourselves." And they did. They stood up and walked away. And as they were walking away, they could still hear Wallace continuing to play his violin. Every single one of them turned right back around, sit down, opened their cases, and began to play. None of those men survived. And we truly believe that when the music stopped, the legend began. Now, whether or not Nearer My God to Thee would have been the last one.
Did you all just hear that?
Yes.
Oh.
Well,
Okay.
it's no surprise to me.
All right.
Because I'll tell you why. We had the great honor to have the band leader, Wallace Hartley, his violin here in this museum. We had it for a 2-week private viewing, public viewing, before it went on auction. And none of the musicians survived. Now, Wallace Hartley, the band leader, when his body was recovered, he was found with his life jacket on, floating upright, and he had strapped to the front of himself a leather valise case. Strapped it on the front of him. Now, if you've ever worn a life jacket, you know it puffs yourself up out of the water. He's face up, and that was on top of him. When they opened up the leather case, they found wrapped inside of some clothing his violin. Now, the violin was never submerged in the water. It was up above the water. Now then, this was no Stradivarius. It wasn't an expensive violin. It wouldn't be. He was just a working musician. He was part of the band. But this one was a very special violin to him. It was an engagement gift from his fiancée. And the plan was, after Titanic, they would get married. And she said, "I'll wait on you." Now, on his violin, there's a little metal placard. And it says, "For Wallace, on the occasion of our engagement, from Mariah." So that was him holding on to her very, very tight. Now, the violin changed hands many times. When it was first found, it was returned to his father, Wallace Hartley's father. And since it was a gift from Mariah, he turned it over to her. She kept it for many, many years. Mariah never, ever married. Now then, years go by. It's changed hands many times. And then about 8 years ago, a lady passed away, and her son found in the top of her attic in England this violin. It was sent to Aldridge & Sons auction house in England, and it spent about 7 years in forensic investigation to determine its provenance, to determine, in fact, that yes, it was on Titanic. It did belong to Wallace Hartley, and this is it. So, before it went for auction, it came to here. It didn't go on a tour of the United States. It didn't go to any other museums. It came here because the owner of this museum and the auction house are close personal friends. We were allowed to have it for a public viewing for 2 weeks before it went for auction. It went for auction in October, and it brought a world record for the highest price ever paid for a Titanic artifact at $1.7 million. An anonymous bidder over the phone. Can you imagine that? Yes. Wow. So, when that violin was brought into this museum, before the public was allowed to come in, all of our crew members were there. The people who had brought it from the auction house, personally brought it with their hands, were standing in the room, and all of the crew are always shown the artifacts and have an unveiling. And we were all there that morning. It was about 8 o'clock. And when it came time to say about the violin, the Aldridge & Sons, who are the auction house, said, "You know, there are some naysayers about this violin." The second he said, "naysayers," the electricity in this building went completely out. So, if I
It was here.
this museum where we're standing right here, yes. So, of course, the crew, we weren't surprised at all. We said, we know it's yours, Wallace. We get it. It's yours, and we believe it, yes. So, whether or not it would be nearer, my God, to thee, let's talk about the eyewitness accounts, okay? If you're in a lifeboat and you're rowing away and you can still see the lights on of Titanic and you can still hear the band, the farther you row away, at some point you won't be able to hear the band as clear as you did when you were right beside it, right? So maybe that was the last song you remember hearing. But the further away, it might have not been the very last song, and vice versa. You might have heard a ragtime song, and you proclaimed that was the last song that they played. I heard it. Well, think of all the things that were happening that night, all of your emotions. You're freezing. Your teeth are chattering. All this is going on. Can you be sure that that ragtime song was the absolute last thing that they played? Maybe it was when you were closer to the Titanic. But the further your lifeboat rowed away, in fact, maybe it was nearer, my God, to thee. Now, Wallace Hartley, the band leader.
What were the two? We'll have to.
Autumn
Yeah.
was another one.
The other one is.
Yeah.
But I will leave you with this. Then I'll leave you alone.
No, sorry.
Wallace Hartley, the band leader, his favorite hymn was Nearer, My God, to Thee.
And you were in there continuing. What were you saying? You played it.
We played it, and the activity just went crazy. It's ramped up again. So evidently, whatever attachments may have been with the artifacts, they were very excited by the playing of the music. So, I don't know, maybe what we'll do is do a sample of the music. How do we go on your phone? Right in the middle.
That's weird.
I'm trying to videotape. And your grid lines are all over the guy. And when Trump starts talking, I need you to turn that off for a few minutes so I can get him without the dots on him, please. Okay.
Oh, that's what's doing that. Let's plug that in instead of doing it that way. That may have been what that popping was. This may make a small pop.
Now's the time to turn on your equipment if you've got stuff that can register things.
I got enough, thank you. Okay.
something over here, aren't you?
Yes. You know, earlier I shared with you a couple of stories about real passengers who were aboard the Titanic. And the first story I shared with you was about the unsinkable Molly Brown. And I told you about that trip that she took to Egypt and how she went to Cairo and how she bought something. Does anybody remember what she bought? A talisman, that's right. A good luck charm. She held it in her hands and she thought, can't hurt. She had her fortune told in Egypt. He took her hand, couldn't speak English, takes her hand, the second he touches her hand, jerks it back. All he can do is shake his head, say water, shake his head no, and say water, over and over again. She didn't think anything of it at the time. Going through the marketplace, she buys a good luck charm, holds it tight, takes it on to Titanic. That good luck charm maybe did just that. Molly Brown's gallery here in the museum, her personal items that have never been on display to the public, given to us by her great-granddaughter, Helen Benzinger. That little talisman that she held so tight, it's my great honor to now present that for all of you.
Sure, let's turn it off. Jamie, come and stand with me. If you don't mind.
Sure.
So this stays on the top.
Yes. It's attached to this crystal.
So the crystal was not original,
Right.
but the talisman is.
Talisman is. You can touch it.
So the best of your knowledge, no psychic, nobody else has really ever touched to see what kind of energy is on
No,
this.
this will be a first.
She likes strong women. Totally likes strong women. First thing that I got when I touched this was, well, I guess this damn thing works. She loves her great-granddaughter. This almost didn't make it off. Do you have anybody portraying her?
Yes, we do. We have in this museum a lady who portrays her, and in the Branson Museum. Two different ladies.
Why is she mentioning shoes?
She's mentioning shoes because when she was growing up in Hannibal, Missouri, there was a horrible snowstorm and her feet got really, really cold, almost to the point of frostbite. And for the rest of her life, she always wore extra socks. And even on the Titanic, sometimes she would sleep in her shoes because her feet never were able to get warm. They were always cold. So she would always sometimes wear shoes to sleep in.
Bless you. She's bawdy.
To say the least.
And whatever the costume is that the people are wearing that are here, she goes, they're wearing the wrong kind of panties.
That's, well, she's probably watching us. She's probably watching everything that goes down because...
Wrong kind of panties.
Well, I will tell you this, and she probably will hate me for telling you all this, but the lady in Branson who does the Molly Brown, the brassiere that she tends to wear doesn't always go for that type, and she was instructed that she must wear a different type. She's got to wear it, it'll be fitted for a new type. So we never saw her panties, but perhaps they're not the right type either.
That was very politically correct.
Yeah, well, I tried my best. I tried my best.
You are a first-class man.
Yes, first class. Proper as I can be.
She said she would have tipped you good.
Oh, thank you.
As much as she's talked about and honored and remembered, she's a little embarrassed of that. A little embarrassed of the fact that she's remembered as much as she is, and like, I don't know that I deserve this. And then she adds, but it sure as hell is fun. I was asking her how she felt about the whole thing about being called Molly.
Yes, she was really never referred to as Molly on the Titanic. And her name was Margaret Tobin Brown, and all of her friends called her Maggie. Never anybody called her Molly. Really, the only time she was referred to as Molly was, there was a movie Debbie Reynolds starred in, The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And that's when the world really started to mention and recognize that name, The Unsinkable Molly Brown. So really, in reality, in real life, on the Titanic, she would have never been called Molly. It would have been Maggie or Margaret Brown.
Mrs. Brown.
Yes, pardon me, Mrs. Brown.
Mrs. Brown. Just had a shadow anomaly go across the ceiling over here. And Mrs. Brown, there's some equipment here in the room, some different pieces of technology. You might not understand the language that we're using. Thank you for that, all right, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. She goes, well, I'm not stupid. Any of these little boxes that are here, we're not saying you're stupid. As a matter of fact, we're saying quite the opposite of that. Some of the little boxes with the lights on them here, if you move close to those, we're gonna leave this open to you. You may be able to communicate with us. So we're gonna leave that open. You've got a camera here. You've got various boxes on tables here. Whatever you can do. Have you got any action around us at all?
Not yet.
Okay? And you'll let us know if anything comes around these artifacts. Perfect. It's kind of what I'm getting off this one for right now. And I mean, who knows if anything else will come. We're gonna leave this one here. We're gonna remove this one. Which are we gonna do?
Well, I'd be proud to leave it here.
Can we do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's do that now.
That way everybody can see it. All right, you ready for the next one?
Oh. That's amazing.
Would it be okay if I put mine beside it?
I don't know if we should put anything else on the table up here.
The other story I shared with you was the true love story of the Titanic. The old man and the old woman, Isidore and Ida Strauss. They owned Macy's department store. All the money in the world. Money was no object, but the thing that they treasured most was each other, the love they had for one another. You know that love when you see it. You see that on people. It's very rare, but you know it when you see it. Well, the night of the sinking, there stands Mrs. Strauss with her foot in the lifeboat, ready to get in. She hears behind her the officer tell her husband, go ahead and get in. There's plenty of room for a first-class gentleman like yourself. She hears her husband say, oh no, not if the third and second-class gentlemen won't be treated the same, I won't go. She steps out, looks him right in the eye and says, we've lived many years together. Where you go, I go. She refused to go. Neither of them survived the Titanic. Mrs. Strauss's body was never recovered. But Isidore Strauss, his body was recovered, sent home to his family, including all of his personal belongings and possessions that he had. One of those things was his gold wedding band. The wedding band that he held when he held her hand, he touched her hand, he never let go. Remember that? I'll never let go. You remember the movie? I'll never let go. I wonder where that line came from. I'll never let go. That's a real true story. The love story of Titanic. So here at the museum, we're very, very honored that the family of Mr. Strauss, in fact his son, the whole entire family, has allowed us to have that gold wedding band here on display. For the first time in the history of this gold wedding band, it's been brought out of the case. This never happened before. So you're part of a very special night. I have with me here Isidore Strauss's gold wedding band.
I almost don't want to touch it. I know. But it's one of those things of, it's almost reverential. But I'm gonna,
She's here and he's not. She said you can touch it. You can tell his family they're still together. Had little hands.
It's a size 6. I tried it.